guys, hi Six! Yeah, it's been a while, and they obviously kind of knew that this was sort of the episode that we were anticipating and really wanted to see. I reckon they sort of probably did that deliberately, this sort of long hiatus before the episode that just reveals everything, gives all the sort of big kind of backstory. And you know what? Shows that do that a lot of the time, that actually kind of annoys me. I've actually recently been watching Lost. Like, I hadn't seen it before, it just sort of occurred to me it was like quite a popular show back in the day, and I hadn't seen it. And it just sort of felt to me like, in that show, the writers are just sort of saying, hey, I bet you really want to know what the fuck's going on here, don't you? Well, you're going to have to keep watching to find out. And that was basically the only reason why anybody kept watching it. And I really don't like that. I don't want to just keep watching just to find out what's going on. But you know what, that's the thing with Gravity Falls is, you know, you have these great little stories that you can just watch. You know, you can watch a random episode out of order and, you know, still enjoy the story that's going on. But at the same time, you have this sort of mystery that you can take an interest in if you really want to, or you can just say, not interested in the mystery, I just want to enjoy the show. You know, it's just kind of take it or leave it as you wish kind of thing, really. And, yeah, even in the case of this episode, I would say it was kind of a case of, you know, this would be a weird episode to be introduced to Gravity Falls in, but you probably could just watch this having not seen another episode and not really be all that lost, because the backstory to the two Stans you have here is pretty interesting on its own. I was actually going to ask at the start of this vlog, you know, who the hell calls their two sons Stan? Calls them both Stan. That makes no sense. But apparently there was actually a code at the end of the episode that actually acknowledges that. You know, something about, you know, like the parents weren't very imaginative or something. They couldn't really think of another name after they thought of Stan or something. It's like, that's what I like about Alex Church. You know, he's very sort of aware of what the audience is going to say or what they're going to think. You know, it's a similar thing with like Zeus's line, if this doesn't line up with my fan fiction exactly, I'm going to be so annoyed. It's like, you know, because I can see a lot of people being kind of annoyed by this episode by like, oh, that wasn't what I thought was going on. That just goes against everything that we've previously learned, or something like that. Whereas for someone like me, I'm not actually too bothered if a show like does what I anticipate it doing, or I'm more interested in kind of a case of like, let's see what the show's going to do, and if I think it's good, fine. Stan's name is actually Stanley, so that number plate that a lot of the fans were speculating about, actually, that was not an animation error, that was probably in there deliberately. Which I kind of figured that was in there deliberately. I couldn't picture Alex Church, you know, allowing something like that to slide. I had to think that something like that had to be in there deliberately. He's very like Kubrick in that sort of sense. He puts everything in there with attention and detail. There's very few little sort of mistakes or things like that. There's animation errors in the show, but nothing. I wouldn't have thought something like that would have been a mistake. Yeah, and the backstory, really kind of interesting to sort of see that. Well, first of all, J.K. Simmons as Stanford, or Ford, as I guess we have to call him now. A phenomenal job, actually, as his voice in this episode. Really, like, that alone just really makes me want to see more of this character, just to listen to that voice. It's sort of like the voice he gave Tenzin in The Legend of Korra. Very sort of similar to that, and again, that's kind of why I like the character of Tenzin as well. Just a really good, sort of authoritative kind of voice that he gives it. I really like that. Very sort of different from how he is in the Spider-Man films, you know. But yeah, this is kind of sort of maybe puts more of a sort of window into that Stan isn't really a particularly bad person. He's just more sort of been thrown into a kind of a bad situation a lot of the times in his life. He's lived in his brother's shadow his entire life. He's sort of been going around trying his best to do what he can in a situation. I always felt that was kind of a cliche, you know, trying to sell, you know, shoddy kind of stuff to the public and everything. And also that kind of gag of saying, this won't happen, and then just simply saying, yeah, it happened. It won't give you rashes. It gave you rashes. Kind of a predictable kind of gag. That was one part of it that actually kind of annoyed me. God, there was so much happening in this episode. Half-hour episode as well. It's a lot longer than normal. Obviously, they realised that they had a lot to cram into this sort of huge sort of backstory thing. I wasn't so keen on the voice actors they gave to do the young Ford and the young Stan. Actually, they sounded a bit too sort of cliched little kid kind of voices. Really, but thankfully we actually don't hear very much of them. You know, they move into the sort of adult voices quite soon in the episode. But yeah, Ford, I'm not entirely sure exactly what went wrong in his life, really. I can't believe it all just sort of stemmed from Stan just hammering down on a desk like that and breaking his perpetual motion machine. Like, is there no way he could have fixed it? Is there no way he could have built another one or anything? Like, his whole life falls apart because of that one thing. I don't really think he should blame Stan for something. I think he's kind of kidding himself if he thinks that Stan was responsible for all of that. And actually, re-watching the episode, I was kind of sort of watching it sort of very sort of carefully to see if I could pinpoint exactly what Ford is talking about at the start of the episode when he says, you think I'm going to welcome you after what you did 30 years ago? I could never quite pinpoint the first time I watched exactly what he was talking about there, and I assume he is still annoyed about him breaking the perpetual motion machine. I was like, he's still annoyed about that after, God knows how many years? I think he's a little bit in denial. So that might come back. That might, he might have to come around and admit maybe he blew things a little bit out of proportion, and maybe he's a little bit more responsible for, allowing his life to go a little bit down the tube. I mean, to be fair, he tried to make the sort of best of the situation by, starting up new projects at the, I forget what it's called now, that university he went to, which is obviously nobody's first choice, but it makes up for it in mostly bug-free dorms. Other thing I was kind of hoping they might cover, but they didn't really, is what was in Journal Number 1 and Journal Number 2, because of course Dipper's only ever had Journal Number 3, so we know what's in Journal Number 3 in quite a lot of detail. What's in the other two? Because those are presumably things that Stanford discovered much sooner, sort of out in the woods kind of area. So I'm interested to know what's in those two journals, and I was kind of hoping, even back at the start of the season, that they were going to cover that. Season 2 was going to be about Journal Number 2, and Season 3 was going to be about Journal Number 1, maybe, or something, and as time went on it would become more significant and more important, but no, it doesn't look like that is what's going to happen. But maybe they will cover the other two journals at some point. Also, it doesn't seem like they didn't cover Ford ever meeting Bill Cipher. I mean, he must have met him because he's in the journal. I was kind of hoping they might address that. Another thing I wasn't quite sure about is I was hoping they were going to cover his relationship with old man McGucket a bit more. Give us a bit more of a window into exactly what McGucket was like before he went mad. Also, does Ford know what happened to McGucket after he was sucked into the portal like that? Because obviously we know from the episode Society for the Blind Eye, we know what happened to him, but did Ford ever find out? I guess he got sucked into the portal quite soon after that incident when McGucket got sort of partially sucked in. Why is he tied to the dummy that they're trying to use as an experiment? Why has he got a rope tied to his hand that causes him to get sucked in? I don't quite understand what that was about. But obviously they have to come up with some explanation as to exactly why McGucket went mad and everything. Lining things up with what we've learned from previous episodes, I suppose, is not telling us anything new. And the other thing, the main thing I kind of wanted to see that we didn't see that disappointed me was Bill Cipher. The other thing I was sort of resigned to the fact we weren't going to learn about in that episode towards the end, which we actually did learn about in the end, was Stan's tattoo. I wasn't sure that we were going to cover that. But yeah, we kind of get an explanation as to what that's about. It's not really a tattoo, it's just something that was branded onto his back while he was fighting with Ford. It still sort of raises more questions about exactly what that symbol is. It's just a sort of red hot thing that caused it to be branded into Stan's back. Why it's just on the side of that machine in the first place. There's no particular clear reason why that should be there. And, does it have any significance beyond it just being the result of a fight that Stan and Ford had or something? Or is it being on Stan's back have any kind of more significance beyond, a scar of battle, if you like? That to me came across as more just an explanation for the sake of an explanation. That's a little bit weaker, if you ask me. It's just more of a case of, I bet you want to know what that is. Well, here's what it is. It's just, it was just something that happened while he was fighting Ford one time. So I hope that comes back and it ends up having a bit more significance, especially, what exactly that symbol is to begin with. Really kind of interesting to sort of see what Stan's life was like as a kid, how he lived in his brother's shadow. It perhaps sort of illustrates a little bit more why he was sort of more desperate to sort of make money, because he was very much doing it for his brother, but he wanted to sort of also prove that he could do things on his own, even if it wasn't sort of completely honest or as credible as what his brother was doing. It was still sort of him achieving something, and I think there's very much a sort of motivation for him to want to do that when his brother has achieved a lot more than him. I was kind of hoping there might be a bit more significance to Stanford having 6 fingers beyond it, just being an indication that he was the author. And, it kind of is. He's kind of sort of victimised. or teased a lot as a kid for having 6 fingers. People say he's a freak and everything, but I don't know. I kind of thought that maybe his having 6 fingers might be the reason he's gifted, perhaps. Maybe in this world that the show's set in, maybe having 6 fingers means, you're very intelligent. I certainly really do want to see a lot more of the character of Ford as this series goes on. Obviously, as Dipper says at the end of the episode, there are a lot of questions that he wants to ask him about the journal, about the stuff in it and everything. The main one being, what was it like when he first met Bill Cipher? I really want to know what that's about. What exactly is Bill Cipher? Where did he come from? Did Ford create him, I wonder? And I'm glad Zeus phoned Wendy at the end of the episode. I was kind of thinking at the end there, at some point Wendy's going to have to find out all of this stuff. I wonder how she's going to take it. Well, that's going to be like for her, but, Zeus kind of tells her. I'm not entirely sure if Wendy actually believes Zeus at this point, but, I imagine by the start of the next episode she will be up to speed about what the heck's going on here. So that'll be kind of cool, because I did want to sort of see Wendy get sort of more involved in the whole sort of mystery side of things there. A lot more as the season goes on, from Into the Bunker onwards. She has become much more of a member of the mystery team, if you like. No new sweater from Mabel in this episode, of course, since it continues on directly from the previous episode, of course. She has to wear the same sweater. Oh, I don't quite understand why the agents just give them the memory stick at the end of the episode, I mean, that's sort of like, obviously they believe what Ford is saying to them in that sort of very real report that he reads to them. They've had their memory erased, so I can kind of see why they might just sort of believe him. How do they know that everything involved in the investigation is on that memory stick if they've had their memories erased? I don't really understand how they could know that. Yeah, that was a little sketchy, a little sort of vague. And also it's a case of, they've done all this building up of the agents, for like the whole of this second season, and then they just kind of just sort of disappear, having had their memories erased without ever really achieving that much, except just, staking out the mystery shack. So that was kind of a build-up to sort of nothing in particular with the agents there. They've kind of explained a lot of it. I was hoping that they're still going to leave a few sort of questions out there, main ones being, about Bill Cipher and about the tattoo on Stan's back. I still want to know exactly what that is exactly, beyond it just being, a mark of a fight he had with Ford. Maybe also, what exactly Ford got up to while he was in the portal all that time, because obviously he's aged 30 years, so it must have been 30 years for him as well. There's not any kind of like relativity thing going on with him. 30 years for us was only seconds for him or something. No, he obviously has been in there for 30 years. What's he been up to in there? What exactly is in the portal, I wonder? I think it's pretty clear that even Stan did not know what exactly that portal was and how it worked, or what caused Ford to get stuck in there in the first place. Or even what happened to Old Man McGucky when he got sucked in there, or sort of partially got sucked in there anyway. So, he's obviously none the wiser in that case, so this will all be down to Ford to sort of explain to us over the next few episodes, I hope. Finally have a few answers, as it's an immense relief to finally know who the author is. And I'm also kind of relieved to find out that Stan, I was worried after the previous episode that, maybe Stan was going to be some kind of imposter, maybe he wasn't the kid's uncle at all, but no, he is who he said he is. He just sort of has these fake IDs. Interesting thing I did not expect at all is Ford is not Dipper and Mabel's grandfather. That is just something I basically just assumed at the end of the last episode, but no, they have another brother who is Dipper and Mabel's grandfather, I guess. Are we ever going to meet him, I wonder? I kind of have to think that they've done that for a reason. They want to sort of distance, Ford's relationship with Dipper and Mabel by not making him their grandfather for some particular reason. Maybe just for that to be more plausible that Dipper and Mabel don't really know much about him, perhaps. Wondered if there was going to be kind of an explanation as exactly why there were 3 journals, why he decided to write all of this about the woods in 3 separate journals as opposed to just one. The most logical thing is just to assume that, he ran out of space in one journal, so he just just started writing another one. But it's interesting, when he starts writing the journal, he puts a number 1 on it straight away, even before he started writing, so he must have anticipated, writing at least 2 of them, and possibly 3. I don't know, maybe there is a reason for that. It's a great thing that this show does. It gives you these answers, but it doesn't, just explain everything. It leaves certain things open, to give you a reason to sort of keep wondering, I wonder what's going on here. But yeah, I'm kind of hoping we're going to get back to more just sort of the regular, standalone kind of stories in the later episodes, because this has been a bit sort of much to take in over the last few months. You know, all these sort of big answers, all this sort of building of suspense to something big. So I hope we're going to get back to a bit more sort of normality in the next episode. So yeah, and more of Ford. I definitely want to see more of this character. Great episode, you know, really a great relief to have found out some big stuff in this episode finally, after a lot of, you know, like a good year or so of speculation. I look forward to seeing where they're going to go with this character of Ford as well. So that's that, guys. See ya.